Women who gave the guy who's been single his whole life a chance. How did it turn out? Good endings only. Story 1. I almost left him for organising my laptop. Now we're getting married. I was 32, newly single, and crashing on my best friend's couch after my ex kept our place and the deposit. Her younger brother, 28, works remote in IT, was around most days. He had never dated anyone, at least not that any of us knew, and mostly kept to himself. Because we were both home during the day, he ended up being my accidental lunch buddy. He asked about my freelance gigs, remembered the tiny stuff, like how I hate milk foam, and even set up a shared spreadsheet so I could track my invoices. Nothing flashy, just steady attention I hadn't felt in years. That's the kind of quiet care that sneaks up on you and feels downright luxurious after drama. A couple months in, he suggested tacos. We both changed clothes, both pretended it was just food, and halfway through it hit us that it was definitely a date. Walking back, he admitted he had never kissed anyone. I said we could learn as we went, and we did. Awkward but sweet. My friend pulled me aside later, worried I might break his heart. I promised I'd be careful, but I kept replaying her warning. The first real bump showed up about 6 weeks later. I'd spent the day job hunting and left my laptop on the kitchen table. When I opened it that night, every single file on my messy desktop had been sorted into neat colour-coded folders. My notes were buried, deadlines hidden, and one contract I needed for an interview was nowhere obvious. He proudly said he'd optimised things so I could find stuff faster. I snapped. I told him it was my work, not a hard drive for him to tinker with, and I grabbed my bag and stayed at another friend's place. For 3 days we texted polite nonsense about rent and nothing else. That knee-jerk pack-the-bag move says the past relationship wounds are still fresh and ready to flare up. On the 4th day I realised the contract had still been right there, just in a labelled folder I hadn't bothered to look in. Feeling stupid, I went back to talk. He was nervous, thinking I might be moving out, but I told him I just wanted to clear the air. We sat in the backyard and hashed it out. He explained that when their mum was sick, he coped by fixing little things, rewriting bills, organising meds, anything to feel useful. That habit never left. I explained that my last boyfriend ignored my boundaries constantly, so even well-meant help feels like control until we talk about it first. We agreed on 2 rules. He asks before reorganising anything of mine, and I speak up before I'm angry enough to pack a bag. Finally, actual communication instead of silent stewing. This is what grown-up problem-solving looks like. It was not an instant cure. He still slips labels onto the spice jars. I still leave coffee cups in every room. But we check in instead of guessing. A year later, we're renting a small apartment together. His dating resume is still 1 line long, my name, and we're saving for a ring. So, giving a lifelong single guy a shot didn't hand me a flawless expert. It gave me someone who listens, tries, and learns. Turns out that beats experience every time. Turns out someone who actually listens beats someone with a dating resume any day. Who knew the best partner might be the one still figuring it out with you? Story 2. My co-workers bet on our breakup, so I married the office monk. Most people in my office called him the monk. Mid-30s, same leftover curry at noon, same train at 5, and apparently no date since a chaotic college girlfriend 15 years ago. I had just limped out of 2 flop relationships and was ready to retire from charming underachievers. The turning point was a late-night server crash a month before launch. Managers were sweating bullets. The monk slid over, muttered something about a corrupt index, and fixed it in under an hour while the rest of us argued about whose turn it was to order pizza. Watching him, I thought, competence is wildly underrated. The next morning, I walked to his desk and asked if he wanted coffee after work. Only one person looked up, my nosy cubicle neighbour, but her raised eyebrow was enough to make my face burn. That microsecond when one raised eyebrow turns a casual invite into a whole courtroom drama. My cheeks flushed in sympathy. Coffee was easy. He listened like he had nowhere else to be, and instead of bragging, asked how I got into photographing old buildings. When I mentioned his monk reputation, he shrugged and said he would rather be alone than tangled in drama again. Then in the same breath, he admitted he had noticed I never lost my temper in meetings and had hoped I would talk to him first. I nearly choked on my latte. Dating him was calm, but occasionally baffling. For my birthday, he handed me a thick book on Gothic arches, because I had mentioned cathedrals once. Sweet, but I still had to explain that flowers are a simpler win. He took actual notes in a tiny spiral pad. Him jotting down "buy flowers" like a bug fix is peak earnestness, and honestly kind of endearing. Not everything was cute. A month in, I showed him a photo series I was proud of. He frowned and called the composition inefficient, and suggested a different lens. I wanted reassurance, not a critique, and told him so, loudly. He froze, tried launching into a 5-step fix, and I walked out of his apartment. We did not speak for 3 days. By the third night, I was half convinced the relationship was a mistake. He broke the silence by leaving a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No links, no spreadsheets, just an apology for assuming optimization trumped encouragement, and a line asking if I would give him another chance to listen first. The humility melted me. We met for noodles, argued again, quieter this time, and drafted a clumsy rule. Before giving feedback, ask whether the other person wants comfort or solutions. It has failed a few times since, but at least we know when we are off script. The comfort or solutions rule might be duct tape and hope, but it's still better than letting silent resentment pile up like unread emails. Work was another hurdle. Gossip spread fast, and our manager pulled each of us aside to remind us of the company dating policy. A few teammates predicted disaster. One even took bets on how long the monk would last in a relationship. That stung, but it also bonded us. Nothing like mild office judgment to make you pick a side. 3 years later, we share rent, 2 aging rescue cats, and an overflowing drawer of his social patch notes. Last winter, after a quiet dinner at home, he slid a small grey object across the table. It was a 3D printed puzzle box. Inside sat a simple platinum band. He only said, "It scores highest for durability." That was it. No speeches. Somehow it was the most honest proposal I could imagine. So I said yes before he finished exhaling. So, giving the lifelong single guy a chance. It turned out messy, patient, occasionally spreadsheet heavy, and, against every office prediction, exactly what I wanted. Looks like the office betting pool forgot one variable. 2 people willing to debug love together will always outlast the rumours. Story 3. I fell for the quiet guy who fought my landlord, and won. I met him at a friend's wedding. Someone dared me to drag the groom's quiet cousin onto the dance floor, so I did. He stiff-armed his way through the song, apologised for every missed step, then surprised me by asking if we could meet for coffee the next morning so he could try again properly. A few months later, we were dating for real. He was brand new to relationships and treated each milestone like a homework assignment. Adorable, if occasionally exhausting. I teased him about the spreadsheets. He teased me about never planning anything further out than dinner. Then my landlord slid a notice under my door. Rent going up $300 per policy revision, effective next month. I spent the evening pacing. He listened, asked for the lease, and promised to look into it. His first letter was polite and short. The landlord ignored it. A week passed, another notice arrived, this one threatening late fees. I started checking apartment listings. He started reading housing statutes until 2 a.m. The next day he emailed a longer letter, quoting a section that, it turned out, only applied to buildings larger than mine. The landlord wrote back, "Nice try," and copied a lawyer. My stomach dropped. He looked mortified that he'd messed up. That sinking feeling when the landlord copies a lawyer, but seeing him refuse to give up after getting it wrong, that's when you know someone's really got your back. We argued. I said maybe I should just move. He said giving up after one bad citation was ridiculous. He disappeared into research mode again, but this time he called a local tenant hotline instead of relying on random forums. They walked him through the correct statute, triple damages for illegal increases plus attorney fees. We rewrote the letter together. His legal citations, my plain English threat to file a complaint with the city, certified mail, return receipt requested. 5 days later, the landlord left me a voicemail promising a friendly resolution if I'd withdraw any complaint. 2 days after that, I received a formal notice rescinding the hike and extending my lease at the original rate. It wasn't cinematic, it was paperwork and waiting, and me learning not to panic every time my phone buzzed. But it worked. Nothing like a shady landlord folding to a certified mail reality check. Paperwork for the win. When the envelope arrived, I just stared at it. He was standing there holding 2 mugs of reheated coffee, eyes rimmed red from too many late nights, and said, almost sheepishly, "Told you facts beat bluffing." I laughed, then cried for a minute, then kissed him right in the doorway. We moved in together the next year, triple-checking every clause before we signed, and got married the year after that. 4 years in, he still handles problems by building colour-coded folders. I still handle weekends by dragging him outside with no plan at all. He is not flawless. He gets tunnel vision and forgets to eat when he's focused. I am not flawless. I impulse buy plane tickets. Somehow the mix works. So how did giving the never-dated guy a chance turn out? I kept my apartment, gained a partner who shows love by sharpening pencils and printing receipts, and learned that 0 experience can also mean 0 games. He still counts beats under his breath when we dance, but life with him feels solid, and that's exactly what I wanted. Turns out the guy who counts beats and colour codes folders can also be counted on for the long haul. Solid really is the new sexy. Story 4. He used a checklist to date me, so I married him. I met him at my friend's board game night when I was 28 and he was 31. Quiet guy, works in IT, still living at his parents' place while socking away a down payment. Mutual friend whispered he'd never had a real girlfriend. Whatever. I liked how he watched the room and laughed under his breath before he spoke. He asked me out for coffee. Before we even sat, he blurted that he had read a first date checklist that morning so he would not mess up. Cute, and a little unnerving. The pattern showed up fast. A good morning text hit my phone every single day at 6:12. Good night landed at 10:12. Same minute, no matter what. He opened every restaurant menu like it was a bomb manual and asked which side of the booth I preferred, as though the fate of the world hinged on my answer. Third, fourth, fifth dates all came with flowers. Different colours, but clearly from the same tutorial. That precision texting is sweet until it feels like I'm dating a Swiss watch. Adorable, but ticking loud enough to raise a flag. 4 months in, I suggested doing something unplanned. Just grab the car and go. He agreed, then spent the entire drive vetoing diners because of health code scores he had Googled. Rain started, we got hungry, and I finally said, "Pick a place or let me out. I'll find food on foot." He froze at a yellow light and muttered that he couldn't guarantee a safe outcome. I lost it. Told him the point was to be together, not to run a risk audit. We argued, he drove me home, and we both sat in our separate apartments stewing. We did not talk for 6 days. I figured that was it. 6 days of radio silence is that uncomfortable stretch where every buzz feels like it might bite. My shoulders just went up an inch reading that. On the 7th night, he showed up at my door, soaked from the same non-stop rain, no flowers, shaking like he might bolt. He said he had drafted an apology email but deleted it because emails can be proofread. This needed to be messy. Then he admitted he had been following tips from a married co-worker and 3 relationship blogs since the moment he got my number, convinced he had one shot and a checklist was safer than being himself. It was not a magic conversation. We tripped over words, circled the block twice just to keep moving, and finally ended up splitting a greasy slice at the only pizza place still open. But it was the first time he spoke without rehearsing. I told him I did not need perfect. I needed present. He said he could probably manage that, though it might look clumsy. Fair trade. A rain-soaked, unrehearsed pizza apology beats 1,000 flawless texts. This is where real starts, right here. The shift was gradual. He missed a morning text. The sky did not fall. I picked a food truck for lunch. He did not Google a single review. He still overthinks, keeps every receipt in case we want to gruff spending trends, and insists the smoke alarm battery be changed a week early. But now he laughs at himself before I can tease him. Last spring, during a walk that was actually spontaneous, he stopped on a pedestrian bridge, pulled out a ring, and asked if I would keep figuring this out with him. No checklist in sight. Just a nervous guy and a ring he picked on his own. So how did it turn out? We got married this summer. He still texts good morning, but the time changes, and that tiny wobble makes me smile every day. That wobbling timestamp is like a heartbeat, irregular in the best way. Here's to loving the unscripted plot twists. Story 5. He calculated our first bill to the penny, and we still ended up together. I sit near a guy who, every day at 11:55, opens a container of plain steamed broccoli and eats it like clockwork. Early 30s, brilliant with code, never chats unless it is about server load. After 3 months of watching florets vanish, I told him I was grabbing street tacos, and he was coming because scurvy was a real thing. He blinked, packed the broccoli away and followed. Lunch was pleasant enough. He listened more than he spoke. But when the bill came, he pulled out a calculator and announced his share down to the penny, including an exact split of the salsa bar surcharge. I paid, joked that I would invoice him later, and figured that was that. Except 2 days later, he asked if broccoli parole was still an option. Tacos became Tuesdays, then we added weekend sci-fi matinees, then grocery runs where he treated the cart like a spreadsheet, aisles in optimum order, price per ounce compared out loud. He had never dated anyone. I learned that during week 6 when I asked who usually split bills with him. He went red and said no one ever stuck around long enough to test it. The precision, he admitted, felt safer than guessing what people expected. That hit different, using math as a shield because people are scarier than spreadsheets. Months rolled into a year. He still reimbursed me for every shared coffee, and I let it slide until the night he tried to Venmo me 31 cents for a donut bite I had offered unprompted. I snapped, told him friendship did not run on ledgers. He stiffened, apologised, and quietly asked if we could talk through a policy, so he did not mess up. We settled on rounding to the nearest dollar, and more importantly, that I would tell him if something bothered me before it festered. It worked. The real tipping point came at the holiday party. A co-worker walked by, called us her favourite office couple, and kept moving. He went silent, shoulders tense instead of confused. The next day, I asked what that comment had done to his brain. He said he knew we looked like a couple. He just had no idea how to upgrade from maybe to official without wrecking everything. Money he understood, relationships were fuzzier. I told him one official date, no calculators allowed, would answer it. That night we walked to my place, split a milkshake because the ban was in effect, and on the stoop he asked if he could try something non-formulaic. The kiss was careful, a little shaky, and honestly perfect. That hesitant first kiss just melted me. When someone's that careful with your heart, you know it matters. The next 3 years were a series of small negotiations. He colour-coded the laundry baskets. I kept mixing colours on purpose until we bought a dark-only hamper. He still packs broccoli most days, but on Fridays brings whatever weird lunch I pick, logging a note that variety improves data sets. I still tease him when he hesitates over a tip jar, and he still thanks me for saying it out loud. He proposed last spring at our taco truck. Instead of calculating, he slid the receipt over. Where the total should be, he'd written, "Life split, 49.5, 49.5, want to round up together?" There was a ring taped to the back. It was awkward, practical, unmistakably him, and I said yes before he could draft revisions. So how did giving the never-dated guy a chance turn out? I got a partner who may never stop counting pennies, but he counts on me just as carefully, and that steadiness beats fireworks any day. Honestly? A guy who counts on you as carefully as he counts pennies? That's the kind of steady that wins. Story 6. My husband had his first kiss at 30, with me. Pretty well, but it was the messy kind of well you only appreciate in hindsight. I moved back to my hometown at 31, bruised from a breakup and determined to stay single. Friends kept mentioning a shy librarian I'd definitely click with. I pictured a guy who alphabetized his socks and ignored it. A month later, I got dragged to a backyard cookout. The librarian was there, hovering near the cooler and counting how many times he'd almost join a conversation. When we finally talked, he was polite, almost rehearsed, but slipped in one dry joke about the grill smoking like overdue books, and it caught me off guard. He asked for my number by handing me his phone and saying, "I don't really collect these, but I'd like to start with yours." Corny but honest. God, that line is so dorky, but somehow it works. There's something about that kind of earnestness that just gets you. We met for coffee. The first 15 minutes sounded like a job interview until he asked if I still played bar trivia. He'd peeked at the bar's Facebook page and scribbled the week's categories on a napkin so he wouldn't blank. Effort counts, so we scheduled trivia. 6 weeks of pleasant PG-13 dates later, we were on my couch watching a movie when I leaned in. He froze like a statue. I paused the film and asked if everything was okay. After a minute of word soup, he admitted he'd never had a girlfriend or been intimate. Ever. No secret cult, no vow, just chronic shyness that got heavier every year. Oh wow, that's a lot to just lay out there like that. Must have taken everything he had to say it. I heard every warning about 30-something hermits echo in my head, but his hands were shaking, and he looked relieved to have finally said it. I told him we could go slow as long as he stayed honest. He agreed. Slow turned out to be glacial. We negotiated hand-holding techniques. Kissing involved practice runs. My impatience flared one night when I went out with a male friend and came back to 17 missed calls and 2 voicemails that ranged from worried to frantic. I let them sit for a day, vented to a friend who said it was a giant red flag, then texted him that I needed space. We didn't speak for almost 2 weeks. He finally emailed, too nervous to call, owning the overreaction and saying he'd signed up for a group anxiety workshop run through the community centre. I agreed to meet, but only after setting ground rules. No phone bombing, therapy stays consistent, and I'd work on giving clearer heads-ups about my plans. He looked terrified and grateful at the same time. Wait, he actually signed up for therapy instead of just apologising? That's not what I expected at all. Progress after that was anything but linear. He sometimes slipped and triple-texted. I sometimes snapped and walked out of restaurants mid-overthink. Once, at a fundraiser, he introduced me as probably my future wife, if she doesn't realise she can do better, which was simultaneously sweet and mortifying. But each stumble came with an actual conversation, not a band-aid. 2 years in, I came home to take out dumplings and a stack of trivia cards. He'd circled the date we met and tucked a ring between the cards labelled history and pop culture. He said, "I wanted a big speech, but you hate speeches, so dumplings?" It was perfect for us. We've been married a year now. He still overthinks text punctuation. I still roll my eyes before I answer. But he's the most thoughtful person I know, and I'm the reason he occasionally does something spontaneous just to prove he can. Giving the never-dated guy a chance worked out, but only because both of us were willing to wrestle with the awkward parts instead of skipping past them. Sometimes the messiest relationships are the ones that actually work. They figured out how to grow together instead of apart. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out this video next.